Alright, so in this learning module, we're going to get stuck right into how to answer questions. We discussed previously that interviewers will be asking you a series of questions to try and assess your job capabilities as well as who you are as a person. So when you're answering these questions, you've got to really be able to demonstrate to your interviewers that you've got the capabilities that they're looking for. And I can tell you up front that the way to do it is not by simply being literal in your answers. And what I mean by that is, let's say for example, they asked you a question about your attention to detail. You can't simply say, oh, I've got great attention to detail because I do this and I do this and I do this in my current role, and that all requires a great amount of attention to detail. That type of answer is just not going to get the cut through that you need. To really get the attention of your interviewers and leave them in no doubt about your capabilities, you need to be able to storify your answers. What I mean by that is probably best demonstrated with an example. So we're going to do a few examples. I'll firstly go through what I'll call a baseline answer, and then I'll add a layer to it, which is a storification of the answer. All right, so let's get into that now. Okay, so let's say I'm a managed funds administrator and I've been asked a question about my attention to detail. So I'm going to give a basic answer, what I'd call a literal answer in response to that question. So in my role as a managed funds administrator, I'm responsible for processing the application and investing the funds, and this requires a lot of attention to detail. Firstly, in the application processing aspect of it, applications can be received from individuals, but also from companies, which require a check of the guarantor's signature and various other company checks. And we can also get applications from trust funds, which require even more details that need to be checked. And each of these details need to be entered into our systems correctly to ensure that the trade can be placed. And then on the investing side, that also requires a lot of attention to detail, because there are some investments that are simple that go into one fund, but there are other investments that are quite complicated and are spread across multiple funds, some of which are unitized funds, some of which are stock market listed funds, some are unlisted. And it's really important that we get each of the details regarding these investments right. Okay, so that's a fairly literal answer. It's trying to demonstrate that the role is, reasonably complex and varied, and it does require attention to detail. And on one sense, that's believable, but let me give you an example of how to storify it now. In my current role as managed funds administrator, I'm responsible for processing applications as well as investing into the funds themselves. It's a fairly complex role as we get investments from individuals, from companies, and from trust funds. And each of those different entities require different nuanced details to be entered into our systems to ensure that the investments can be placed correctly. When I first started doing this role, me and my colleagues were getting our work checked by our supervisors who acted as data checkers. But after 2 months in the role, I was moved on to that data check role, and I was checking the work of some of my colleagues who were hired at the same time as I was. Once I did that role for another 2 or 3 months, I was then moved on to the investment side of things, and this was a whole new level of complexity. There was various details around things like the nature of the managed funds, whether or not it was a unitized fund or not, whether or not it was a stock market listed fund or whether it was an unlisted fund. All of these details had to be entered correctly into our systems in order for the trade to be placed. And it was critical that these trades were placed correctly, because if we were to get it wrong, there was a big financial impact. If there was a trade that had to be unwound because of an error on our part, then we'd obviously be subject to adverse market movements, potentially adverse market movements, which could have a really big financial impact on the company. So needless to say, it's a pretty high stress kind of position, but it's one that I enjoy. Okay, so that answer is pretty different to the first example, and the reason it's different is because we've been able to storify the answer. In this answer, we're telling a story, and it's a story of progress. It's a story about someone who's come in at a data entry level, has progressed to a data checking role, and then moved on to an investment role in which they really understand the consequences and the importance of what they're doing. And when you tell this story of progress, it creates a narrative, and the narrative is basically one of someone who can really grow into a role. It's a narrative of someone who can learn on the job, can learn faster than their colleagues, and someone who can understand the bigger picture consequences of what they do. And when you're starting to present this kind of answer to your interviewers, it's really going to cut through, because someone who understands the importance of attention to detail it's going to resonate with your interviewers much more than simply someone who has got good attention to detail. But when you tell this story of progress anyway, it's completely evident that you've clearly got very good attention to detail. All right, so this has taken this answer to a much higher level. Now let's try and improve it even further. And the way we improve that even further is by what I call humanizing the answer. So that is, try to, again, we'll do this with an example to make it clearer, but basically you want to throw in some additional features into your answer that really demonstrate who you are as a person. All right, so let's do another example where we try and humanize our answers. Now, in this example, I'm not going to go through the answer in its entirety, but if you can imagine that we've just finished the previous answer and we're going to try and tack on a few points onto the back of that previous answer that we've gone through. So these are the additional points that I think you can put into your answer to help humanize it. Okay, so now that I'm managing investments into these funds, it's a role that's not without its stresses, but it's something that I've really enjoyed. I quite like the additional responsibility, and I feel like I'm making a meaningful contribution to the company overall. And the role is, it does get broken up because there are some days where I get asked to move back to that data checking role that I described earlier, and there are even some days where I'm doing data entry. It just depends on the workload of the office really, and I'm happy to get bounced around between the different duties depending on where I'm needed. I'm happy to help out overall. Okay, so when you throw in a couple of little points like that, it really is the icing on the cake for this answer because it demonstrates a few human qualities that are quite important. Firstly, it demonstrates that you're a team player. If you're happy to be bounced around between the different teams, you know, you're there for the good of the company. It's a really good attribute and a really good quality to present in your answers. So you show you're a team player. You show that you're flexible. You show that you're not afraid of additional responsibility. I think that's a really key part of adding that element to it as well. And when you piece this together with all the other attributes that we discussed previously, so you know, we were talking about that story of progress, that story of someone who can learn on the job, can learn faster than their colleagues, someone who understands the bigger picture of why it's so important to have this attention to detail. And then you throw in these additional qualities like, you know, you're not afraid to step up to the plate and take on some additional responsibility, you're a team player, you're flexible. Once you present all of this together as a complete package, your interviewers will have forgotten what the question was because they're just so blown away by how complete you are. And yeah, okay, it was a question about attention to detail. Of course you've got attention to detail. That is not in dispute at all. And your interviewers have moved on and they are just, they're starting to picture you in the office basically because they're seeing all these other qualities that you can bring. And if all the other candidates in response to that question just say, oh, I've got great attention to detail because I can do X, Y, Z, okay, good. That's good for you because you're presenting a much more complete picture for your interviewers. Okay, so let's go through the whole process again with another example, and I'll try and keep it as brief as possible this time, but we'll have the same thing. So we'll have a question from the interviewers, and then we'll give firstly a baseline answer, and then we'll try and storify that answer, and then sort of put in the human touch as well. So let's say that this particular situation is someone applying for a social media manager role, and the interviewers have asked a question about something generic, so something like, please tell us about your experience in social media management. So I'm currently working as a social media manager for a software development company, and in that role I'm responsible for managing all the business's social channels. This involves generating and posting content across the likes of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn, as well as in the business's Facebook group. I'm also responsible for running paid ads across each of those platforms to promote any sales that the company has in play, and I allocate budget based on performance within each of the channels that we see from an ROI point of view. There's also a community management aspect to my role, and this involves responding to various questions and comments that come in via the Facebook group, as well as in response to any posts that I've made. So it's quite a varied role. It's given me extensive experience across community management, content generation and posting, as well as paid ads and paid marketing across a number of different platforms. Okay, so that's a reasonable answer, a bit of a stumble at the end there, but that's okay. I think most interviewers would see that answer and say, okay, that's a reasonable extent of experience, and for the most part I think they'd probably be pretty satisfied with that. But we can make it better. We can make it a lot better by telling a bit of a story that really demonstrates a few more qualities that are a bit deeper than just hands-on experience. So let's have a go at that. So currently I'm working as a social media manager for a software development company, and in that role I'm responsible for managing all the business's social pages. The business has a lot of products and a lot of product updates, and I communicate those to our followers through posts across all of our social channels: Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. I'm also responsible for promoting any sales that the company has running, and I do this both to existing users as well as potential new customers. There's also a community management aspect to my role, and that involves responding to various comments and questions that come in through our Facebook group, as well as in response to any posts that I've made as well. And some of the feedback we get from our users is actually quite useful, so much so that it's prompted me to reach out to the product team and show them some of the feedback that we are getting from our customers. And believe it or not, the product team have actually taken this on board, and they've developed some new products and some new product features in response to the comments that they've received from our community. And I'm happy to say that these are amongst some of our best-selling products now, so it's been a really good outcome. And there's obviously a lot of value in our community. So as the social media manager, I do what I can to really promote and nurture and grow this community. And I do this leveraging various tactics across our paid marketing campaigns, as well as through the organic posts that I do across each of the channels. Because ultimately, this community is a real asset to the business. Okay, so that's a very different answer in many ways, similar in many ways, obviously, but that has taken it to another level here, because now we're not just talking about our experience across social media channels. We're telling you a story of, basically a story about a great business outcome. And the narrative here is someone who has really stepped up in their role and used strategic thinking and commercial savviness to achieve great business outcomes, not just for the business, but also for the community, for their customers. So you're demonstrating that you've got a real customer focus, you've got commercial awareness. You're sort of subtly also suggesting that you've got good interpersonal skills and relationship building skills, if you can just sort of easily walk into the product team and pass on some feedback from your community of customers. So there's a lot of pieces to this second answer that are really good qualities to demonstrate to your interviewers. All right, let's try and take it to another level by just adding in a couple of elements at the end now to really humanize and just show a few other human qualities that I think are really would serve you really well. So let's do that now. Okay, so let's wrap up this answer with a few points at the end. And like before, I'm not going to go through the entire answer. Let's just sort of assume that we're at the end of that answer now. And I'll just throw on a couple of points at the end here. So yeah, it was really a great business outcome overall. And for me personally, one of the most pleasing aspects was having the chance to go back to our community of users and say, look, your feedback's been taken on board and we've actually developed a new product for you, or a new product feature, or a new product update thanks to your feedback. There's something just really enjoyable about doing that. And I'm also really just grateful to the business for being so open to ideas from our community and being so flexible as well. I know the product team's got a pretty long queue of items that they are trying to get through, but to be able to prioritize the ones that they have, it's been a really good outcome all around, and something that I'm really thankful for. All right, so a couple of little points here. So firstly, just mentioning that how personally satisfying it is to go back to a customer and sort of say thanks for the feedback and here's your outcome. Just demonstrates just a nice feature. I don't know really how to describe it, and that's the thing with a lot of your interviews, is your interviewers ultimately, when they hire someone, they do have trouble expressing exactly what it is, the qualities that they saw in that candidate that made them hire them. But this is sort of an example where someone's obviously not just doing their job, but they're doing it with real passion and a real enjoyment and satisfaction. So that's one aspect. But the other aspect that I think is really important is the fact that the candidates here expressing some gratitude and appreciation of the business being so accommodating and sort of listening to their input. Because, look, the alternative could have been something along the lines of, this product team, I can't believe they had these products in the first place that were so terrible, and it needs the average user to actually tell them how to write their products. It's just terrible and hopeless. I mean, that might be the reality of what you're actually thinking, but you would never present it in that way in the interview because it doesn't reflect well on you, even if it's true, right? If you can express it, if you can reverse that and express it in a way of, complete gratitude and appreciation for the business for actually listening to the feedback and accommodating it and bringing it all together, it just presents you in a much, much better light. And again, these are the sort of qualities, gratitude, appreciation, respect for your business. These qualities will just serve you really well in the interview. All right, so that's about it for this module. Let's wrap it up with a quick summary now. So to summarize this learning module, we have spoken about how to demonstrate your job capabilities by storifying your answers to interview questions. You can't simply just give literal answers. It's just not going to get the cut through with your interviewers. You need to be able to create a narrative that leaves them in no doubt about your ability to perform in the role. And the only way to do this is by storifying your answers. The other thing we spoke about in this module was how to humanize your answers. Now, you'll remember from the previous module that who you are as a person is every bit as important, if not more important, than your job capabilities. So you want to ensure you're taking every opportunity to highlight some of the human qualities that really make you who you are.